Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight I am going to be talking about those lights. Before I get going, my latest book is going to be called South Texas Paranormal, Maybe. I'm still collecting stories from all over the place. If I get enough from far away, I might change the title to coincide with the location of most of the stories that I get. If not, I'll add a chapter to the book on stories from all over the place. I do mean all over the world. If you have a good story, or even a bad one, that you'd like to share, send it to me. I'll fix any spelling mistakes and make a few of my own. I'll try to put the story into a readable format, and maybe this time next year I'll have another book to sell. If you do have a good story, or like I said, a bad one, you can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. That's the Ark like as in Noah, and NASA like as in, well, those guys in white lab coats. I really hope the Edinburgh UFO conference is still going to happen, but right now it's not looking too good. The Phoenix bookstore is on its last legs. They might close. Now, this is horrible. Laredo just isn't that much into reading, and I don't know why. I've been to book fairs in other towns, and I've sold out every book I had each and every time. I've been to book events and ran out of books. In Laredo, I'm happy to sell half of what I bring. Is it Laredo doesn't like reading, or are folks here addicted to Kindle? I don't know. It's kind of strange, but, well, that's Laredo. Tonight's show was suggested by Lindsay Johnston, who used to live in Australia and then moved to England. After listening to the show I did about the Border Patrol misadventures, Lindsay asked about the Minmin Lights that people have seen down in Australia. The story from the Border Patrol was actually one of my own. Just one of many weird events in my life. I'll bet most folks have some things in their past they can't explain, but unfortunately a lot of people will write these off as being nothing but illusions or misidentifications. How many times has somebody seen something actually spectacularly paranormal and then convinced themselves that they were mistaken? I don't understand why people will do that, but I've seen it happen so often it's bizarre. As a retired Border Patrol agent, I've had a few weird sightings of my own. The one I'm referring to took place down at the Webb County line, south of town. Right off of Highway 83 is a gate that takes you into Los Hermanos Ranch. On slow nights, I would back up to the gate. It was set off the highway several feet so that 18-wheelers could get to the gate without having their trailer sticking out in the middle of the road. It was around a corner, so it was invisible to most of the highway. Well, folks sneaking into the country from Mexico, they would be on the other side of the road and they'd look both ways, but from their aspect, they couldn't see me sitting at the gate. They'd cross the highway and then they'd have to come over to the gate because the fence along that area was all deer fence, really high, and the gate was just a regular old pipe gate. I was out of sight around the corner and they'd come running around the corner and there I'd be. Now, these folks were mostly just honest workers, guys out looking for work on a ranch somewhere. We called them brushwalkers. These were hard workers and very pleasant folks. Well, as I was sitting there one night, waiting to see if anything was going to cross, I spotted a light coming along the fence line across the highway on the Clark farm. It was either January, since the brush was thin enough to see a long way into it, or it was August when everything was dead from a lack of rain. At first, I thought it might be some agents following a group because aliens seldom use flashlights. As the light was moving along, I began to think maybe it was a group of aliens because agents don't use lights that way. You aim the light down at the ground, but you cover the lens with your hand so that there's just a little tiny bit of light. It's called being tactical. And you don't swing the light back and forth because it'll reflect off of trees and bushes, and anybody within a mile will know you're there. Well, the light was coming right along the fence, which was an 8-foot-high deer fence. It never slowed down. It crossed right where the fence was, and then it took a sharp right-hand turn and began heading south. It was following the highway. I pulled out my NVGs and night vision goggles, and I tried to see if I could spot the person behind the light. No sense in doing it when the light was coming towards me because the glow of the flashlight would have burned, well, not burned, but it would have made it impossible to see anything. All you'd have seen was a great big bright glowing object because the light would overwhelm the optics. Some of y'all will understand that, and the rest of y'all can just take my word for it. There's no sense looking at a light when wearing NVGs. As I'm sitting there looking, well, the light didn't show up on the NVGs. There was nothing there. It was just dark. When I took the goggles down, I could see the light going along the fence line. And as I sat there watching it, it slowly faded away into nothing. Kind of like when the batteries go dead on a flashlight, maybe. Well, it wasn't very far, so I just walked across the highway to look for any footprints in the dirt. There were no prints. None. The ground was clean of any what we called sign at the time. Along this particular fence line is a great big wide drag. It's where we pull a bunch of tires attached to a chain up and down the fence line. It gets rid of any grass, and it churns up the dirt, and it makes it nice and soft so that anybody trying to cross it will leave footprints. It's impossible, well, 99.9% impossible, to get across a good wide drag without leaving sign that you were there. There were no footprints. None. And the fence where the light had come through, there was no hole, there was no gate, there was no opening. I couldn't figure out how that light got from one side of the fence to the other without going up and over the wire. Well, all I could think of was this had to have been some kind of a ghost light. Being into ghosts and UFOs, it didn't really freak me out or anything. It made me want to go back to that gate every night and sit there and watch to see if I'd see this light again. But the duty calls, and sometimes you just can't do that. One of my favorite occupations or details was sign cutting. This is when we would go out onto the ranches and look for people walking from point A to point B. Some of these folks were willing to walk unusual distances, and they always seemed to know where they were going. You hardly ever met up with a group that had gotten lost. It did happen. Sometimes we would be called out to a ranch because a group had started walking in circles. They didn't know where they were heading. Kind of strange things would happen, but well, it made the job interesting. Usually, sign cutting was 6 in the morning until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time it was getting just too hot to breathe, it was time to go home. That was normally. But on occasion, especially in the wintertime, we might work evenings. Sometimes we would even work midnights. One night, working the San Antonio ranch, I believe it was in December because it was cold out. Might have been January. One of our agents called and said he had a group following a fence line east. We all kind of moved towards the area, figuring we'd catch him in between us and him. People back at the station, the boss and such, would keep close eye on what we did. If we weren't catching enough people to make our position necessary, they would sometimes yank us off and send us back to the line where they knew there was work to be done. So when you were sign cutting, you would put some work out trying to catch these guys because nobody wanted to go back to the line. That was just horrible. My least favorite occupation was line watch. So we were all hot and bothered trying to catch this group, thinking, hey, this is unusual, a group heading north in the middle of January. So we're trying to catch them. Now, driving at night without any lights on isn't that hard if you know what you're doing and you go really slow. You don't want to put your headlights on because, like I said, people out in the brush will know you're there. We converged on an area just ahead of where the agent on foot was, and then I clomb up over a big deer fence. There are lots of deer fences out there, and I sat in the brush waiting for the group to get to me. As I'm sitting there, I looked up, and I could see the agent walking towards me. As he got up close enough, I told him I was there and asked him where the group was, and he said they were just in between us a second ago. All the other guys on the detail got together, and we started sweeping the area, looking for any sign that there had been aliens there. The only footprints were our own. We chased the lack of footprints all the way back to where the agent actually had seen the light for the last time. He said as they were getting close to my position, the light had slowly faded away. There were no footprints other than our own. He swore he'd been following a group with a flashlight for about maybe a mile. It got me to thinking, perhaps what he had seen was the same thing I had seen while sitting at that gate. We were about 4 miles from that gate, 4 miles farther east, but almost in a straight line, so maybe it was the same light, or maybe it was a different light, but the same kind. Don't know what it was. Maybe I never will. Down under, they have some lights that have become known as the Minmin Lights. M-I-N-M-I-N. The origin behind the name comes from one of many witnesses who had seen them. It was published in a newspaper January 25th, 1947. The story was the account of a local stockman who said he was being followed by these lights as he was on his way to Baulia. A stockman is kind of like a cowboy or a rancher here in the U.S. The Minmin Hotel had been a combination hotel, gambling hall, and bar, which was located midpoint between Middleton and Baulia. There were many small shanties that cropped up around the hotel. Mostly this was to house the workers in the area or those employed by the hotel. It was a place to stop in and get a drink or 20. A stockman would get paid. They would stop in for a drink, and sometimes they would wind up dead out in the bushes. Anyone walking through the front door with a wad of cash after getting paid for the month would attract the attention of the unsavory crowd that hung out looking for easy pickings. The drinks were sometimes enhanced with drugs to make their effects 10 times stronger. As the ranch hand began to sway about as if he was drunk, somebody would escort him to the back where the rooms were. He was not going to be put to bed. He was about to be rolled. All his valuables would be removed. If the unwary stockman wasn't in good shape to begin with, the drugs just might kill him. In this case, the body would be hauled out into the brush and dumped. As this happened several times, eventually somebody decided to open a cemetery out behind the hotel. The Minmin Hotel also had gambling, where you could lose all your money yet escape still on your feet. The games were all rigged. Being a bar, frequently people who worked very hard for what little they had, fights would break out all of the time. This was the lawless part of Australia, and if you felt as if you'd been cheated, there was nobody to complain to. The hotel sat right on the border of two territories where there were few lawmen ever patrolling. This led to many people trying to get justice by beating somebody into giving them their money back. There were also a lot of folks that just couldn't handle their booze. 1918, the hotel caught fire and burned to the ground. The remains were never rebuilt, but the location of the hotel now has a facade that shows its former front. Right behind this hotel is an old cemetery where some of the more fortunate, if you could call them that, the dead were buried instead of being dumped out in the brush. The cemetery is still there today. The stockman who gave his 1947 account had passed by the area shortly after the hotel had burned down. Even though it was 25 years from his sighting, he had kept his story to himself until deciding it was time to tell people. The man said he was passing through the area where the Minmin had been. The hotel was nothing but a burned-out shell. In the middle of the cemetery, the man saw a light. It was just a glow. It increased in size until it looked to be about the size of a watermelon. The light seemed to split into several glowing orbs. This was a somewhat disturbing sight, and so the stockman got his horse heading away as quickly as he could. The light began to follow behind him. Looking back to see where the lights were, the stockman said they were following him right up until he reached the edge of town, and then they stopped. Well, he kept going to Balia. Once there, he got to wondering what he had seen and whether others might have seen them as well. He contacted the law enforcement in Balia, and he filed a report. The constables didn't think his story was worth much, but they did look into it just enough so they could say there was nothing to it. They were surprised to discover hundreds of people had seen the lights over the years. Have you ever wondered where the name constable comes from? Way back after Rome had fallen apart and Europe was just a bunch of villages, people were left to their own when it came to crime. The citizens would band together and they would administer justice however they saw fit. As kings and barons and noblemen began to crop up, they wanted somebody around to take care of their belongings without getting the locals involved. They were afraid that the locals just might help themselves to all the royal goods. Being royals, they didn't have time to run around checking on all their own personal possessions. Someone created a position for somebody to be in charge of keeping an eye on things and forming up an army if the need arose. If somebody stole a bunch of the king's horses, this person was authorized to round up a group of other men and then go and find who had stolen the horses and do with them as he pleased. Well, this became a haughty position. The man in charge was given the title of Count. A count had a section of land he ran, but this guy had an entire country that belonged to someone else, but he was in charge of overseeing it. So the title Count was extended to include all the stables belonging to the royal. The new title was Count of the Stables, which slowly over time changed to Constable, That's where we get the name. Back in Australia, as the constables asked questions, they discovered the locals had been seeing lights in the area as far back as their folklore went. Aboriginal people believed the Minmin Lights were the spirits of elders. One Aborigine named James Birch said, "As a kid growing up, the old people used to tell me these were old people's spirits looking after the country." The name Aborigine is just too vague a term. A lot of people call the first inhabitants of Australia Aborigines. The word Aborigine means inhabiting or existing in a land from the earliest time or from before the arrival of colonists, also known as indigenous people. Native Americans would be Aborigines. Anyway, I kind of like how the Aborigines call themselves. They refer to themselves as blackfellas. Like that giant red rock out in the middle of nowhere, Uluru. The white folks started calling it Ayers Rock. What is the actual correct name for something? Whatever people recognize it as. I'm not going to get into a tiff over the right name for anything. Call them Aborigines, call them Indians, call it Uluru, or you can call it Ayers Rock. The Aboriginal Australians have always been wary and have consistently believed that the lights were the spirits of their dead ancestors risen from the grave. This theory got a further boost with the increase in sightings of these phantom lights in the Baulia region after Europeans started eliminating all of the Aborigines. They thought anybody that wasn't from Europe didn't have a right to live. The natives believed their ancestors had risen from the grave to avenge the atrocities against their community. Now, I know some folks are going to try and say that Europeans acted badly any time they went somewhere. Yes, death followed any settlements in any countries people from Europe landed in. Anyone want to try to explain Genghis Khan? He liked to wipe out entire communities too. And then there was the Aztecs. They would take prisoners, thousands of prisoners, and then they would sacrifice them to their gods. Thousands of enemies were cut open and their hearts offered up atop those huge pyramids. Let's face it, it's not just those white folks who like to kill anyone that didn't look like them. There are people of every color who would love to kill anybody that didn't look like them. It's not just one group, it's all groups. Maybe it's just a glitch in the system. Maybe people just like killing other people, I don't know. The Minmin Lights have also been reportedly spotted in other regions of Australia, such as the Northern Territory and the northern New South Wales. Stories of these phantom lights have cropped up in folklore of numerous cultures around the world as well. Places like the Celtic cultures of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Folk belief attribute the phantoms to fairies or elemental spirits, going by such names as the hobby lanterns, which were found in the 19th century Denham tracts. When observed in graveyards, they are known as ghost candles, also a term for the Denham tracts. The Denham tracts consisted of publication of a series of pamphlets and jottings on folklore. There were 54 of them in all. And they were collected between 1846 and 1859 by Michael Denham, a Yorkshire tradesman. I guess he had a bit of time on his hands, and so he collected folkloric stories, and he wrote about them, and he drew some sketches. The name Will-o'-the-Wisp or Jack-o'-lantern are used in ideological folk tales, recorded in many forms in Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, and Appalachia. Why Appalachia? Well, many people from Scotland, when they came to the New World, that's where they settled. You'll also find these stories in Newfoundland, up in northeast Australia. Up in Canada. I'm on the wrong side of the world. Newfoundland is part of Canada on the Atlantic coast. In these tales, protagonists, named either Will or Jack, are doomed to haunt the marshes with a light for some misdeed. They committed some horrible crime, and for the rest of eternity they have to walk through the marshes with either a candle or some other glowing object. One version from Shropshire is recounted by Briggs in a dictionary of fairies, and it refers to somebody named Will Smith. Will is a nasty blacksmith who was given a second chance by St. Peter at the gates of heaven. Instead of going down and doing good deeds, he does bad things for the entirety of his second chance. Well, since he couldn't get into heaven, he had to go the other way. Well, the devil, I guess, didn't want him in hell, so he gave him a single burning coal in order to stay warm, and then he sent him back out to travel the earth, hanging out in marshes and backwaters. His object was to mislead and lure foolish travelers into getting stuck out in the marshes. Kind of like Tom Fool did in England, but that's another story. An Irish version of the tale has a not very nice person. They called him Drunk Jack or Stingy Jack, who, when the devil comes to collect his soul, he somehow tricks the devil into turning himself into a coin. This is so that Jack can have one last drink before he goes to the bad place. When the devil obliges, Jack takes the coin and puts it in his pocket right next to a crucifix. This prevented the devil from being able to turn back into his original form. In exchange for his freedom, the devil grants Jack 10 more years of life. When the 10 years are up, the devil comes to collect his soul, but Jack tricks him once more into climbing a tree. I don't know how he gets him to climb the tree, but it just said he got him to climb the tree. And then Jack carved a cross at the bottom of the tree. And now the devil is stuck up in a tree. In exchange for removing the cross, the devil forgives Jack's debt. However, nobody with Jack's personality would ever be allowed into heaven. So they sent him back down. Well, the devil didn't want Jack in hell because, well, he's already had enough trouble from this guy. So now Jack is condemned to walk the face of the earth for all of eternity, and once more he has been given a burning ember to light his way. The name Jack in British is kind of like here in the U.S. where they call somebody a dude. If you don't know a person's name, you just call them Jack, like Jack the Ripper, or Spring-Heel Jack, or Jack and the Beanstalk. Another version of the tale is Willie the Wisp, also known as Willow the Wisp, which is an orb that appears mostly around bogs and marshes, and it is believed to be either fairies or spirits. Some will say it's simply swamp gas being illuminated by light from the moon, or some other form of phosphorescence. The popular jack-o'-lantern from Halloween decorations stems from this folklore. Other names associated with the phenomenon include fairy lights, ghost lights, and ignis fatuus, which is swamp gas. Once more, swamp gas is being thrown around as if it is the cause of just about any and all weird phenomenon. Other sightings of this phenomenon include Luz Mala, or the evil light from Southern American countries. This phenomenon is said to be seen mostly in the countryside. It is called by many different names, but they all basically mean the light is bad. It is said that this light hovers over the ground, and it's made up of a toxic gas that is from decomposing bones, which is fatal to humans. In the driest of seasons, it is said that this light is brilliant, and that streamers of light come from it, kind of like spider webs or misty little webs. Some men who said they followed the light and survived have only found a broken Indian pottery and human remains. It is said that this light makes a noise that sounds like screams of pain and terror. People also say that if the light falls at the foot of a hill, there's treasure buried there, but that only the bravest are able to find it. Those who believe the legend go and look. Here in Laredo, back in the old days, people traveling along any of the roads would look for lights out in the brush. These ghost lights were supposed to be sitting above a treasure that had been buried either by Spanish conquistadors or Indians. As far as the records go, nobody suddenly became rich after a trip through the countryside, but a lot of our records are missing. The theories about the origin of these mysterious glowing orbs are endless. None of them are definitive. Barring superstition, discussed already, conjectures range from firefly-like bioluminescent insects, but it would take a lot of insects to make one of these orbs, UFOs, or simply gases being released from the Earth. One of the most popular scientific theories backing the appearance of the Minmin Lights is that they are simply swamp gas caused by decaying matter. The thing is, swamp gas is found in marshy areas, and the Minmin Lights are seen in the dry areas. And now for a couple of well-placed commercials. Let my friends get a little business. If you hear a bump in the night and you think you might have unwanted guests, contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. Their services are free. They do more than just ghost hunts. They also do archaeological digs using metal detectors and shovels. You can reach them at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. If you'd like to know more about the Laredo Paranormal Research Society, you can read the book. I wrote it. You can find it at Amazon.com, the Organic Man Coffee Trike, or at the Phoenix Bookstore if they haven't closed yet. If you're having to hold things out at arm's length so you can focus on them, maybe it's time you got your eyes checked. Why suffer? It doesn't take that much to get a pair of glasses, and believe me, nobody's going to care but you. Check out Optica del Norte at 107 Calle del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. And maybe it's time you took better care of your skin. I wonder, do women even bother putting lipstick on since everybody's wearing a mask today? Call Lourdes James at 956-723-3019 and set up a free skincare appointment. Maybe it's time you did something besides just use soap and water. Coffee is what makes the world go round. And if you haven't tried the Organic Man Coffee Trike's coffee yet, you don't know what you're missing. Swing on by and have a cup of the best coffee on the planet. And also, you can buy it online at organicmancoffeetrike.shop. And that's it for my friends' quick and fancy commercials. I still haven't gotten around to replacing my soundboard, and the way things are looking right now, I just might not bother. One of the most famous ghost lights in Texas, or some of the most famous lights in Texas, are the Marfa Lights, which are also known as the Marfa Ghost Lights. These lights have been observed near U.S. Route 67 on Mitchell Flats, east of Marfa, about 410 miles northeast from Laredo. They've gained some fame as onlookers have attributed them to paranormal phenomena such as ghosts, UFOs, will-o'-the-wisps. Of course, scientists suggest most, if not all, are atmospheric reflections of automobile headlights and campfires. You gotta love those scientists. They throw out an explanation that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and then they're shocked when people don't want to listen to them. The Marfa Lights have been seen by folks for hundreds of years, long before automobiles were even thought of. Locals have seen these lights out in the brush. They used to call them Apache Lights. There are those who will say those are just lights from cars on Route 67. But Route 67 wasn't around for nearly as long as the lights have been. The history behind the mystery. The first written mention of the lights occurred in 1883 when a ranch hand named Robert Ellison reported seeing the lights while herding cattle in the Mitchell Flats east of Marfa. He assumed that the lights were campfires of the Apache who were gathered in the area. Well, the Apache, who had been in the area for years before any ranchers, said they'd seen the lights out there as well. They thought they were stars that had fallen from the sky. Other Indian tales are that the lights are the spirit of Chief Chinati, who the Chinati mountain range to the southwest of Marfa is named after. During World War II, pilots flying from nearby Midland Army Airfield tried to figure out what the lights might be. They weren't able to come up with any kind of conclusions. It wasn't long before somebody tried to suggest everybody seeing the lights was actually seeing moonlight being reflected from the mountains to the west. This would explain the lights, except the lights showed up when the moon was not in the sky. The lights have become such a point of the region that the Marfa High School built a viewing area on Highway 90 just east of town. November 2011, the Laredo Paranormal Research Society went out to Marfa, Texas, to have a look and investigate the lights that had been seen by thousands of people. Setting up the viewing area, the team deployed cameras, night vision equipment, recorders, and a few investigative tools to try to get some idea as to what the lights might be. Well, those lights didn't disappoint. They showed up and dazzled the researchers. Ishmael took a laser pointer and he aimed it at one of the lights. Well, the light promptly vanished. He said, "Well, that was odd. Let's try it again." Taking aim at the next light, they saw the light disappear as soon as the laser beam made contact. In some instances, a bright light could be seen with the naked eye, but when the night vision camera was used, a second and sometimes third light could be seen with it. The ghost lights flickered almost like a candle or a flame, giving them a pulsation while observed in the Mitchell Flats. Car lights will have a flickering effect if viewed through the trees, but they don't pulse like the Marfa Lights. As time goes by, people come up with new and exciting explanations that only sound good until you ask a few questions, and then the explanations fall apart. There are those that will tell you the Marfa Lights are nothing more than foxfire, also known as swamp gas. This explanation sounds very good until you consider that the Marfa Lights are found out in the desert, far from the nearest swamp. It's good to know the LPRS were the first investigators to try contacting the lights using a laser pointer. No conclusions were reached by the LPRS, but they did their best to at least document their experience. Ishmael said, "In conclusion of the Marfa Lights is to be inconclusive. We only have a possible theory or two. We really do not know what they are. What we do know is that with a flickering of a laser, they would turn off with intelligence or diffuse themselves to avoid the laser. What in the laser experience made it more of a mystery and less of a natural phenomenon? On their second trip to Marfa, all the investigators were focused on the lights moving about the southeast. Paranormal investigators Joe Rogerio, who was scanning the horizon with a FLIR thermal camera, spotted something when he turned and looked to the northwest. He spotted a dark blue-looking object moving through the clouds. He yelled for anybody and everybody to look to the northwest. He said there's a weird anomaly over there. As all the LPRS members turned their IR cameras, the glowing orb moved behind one of the power poles. When Ishmael aimed a laser light at the orb, it sparked and flashed, kind of like a small explosion, and then it dimmed down to nearly nothing. When the laser beam was turned off, the glowing orb remanifested to its original size. As they stood there watching the orb, a train began to pass on the tracks which are to the north. The orb dimmed and then blinked out. It was as if the train had somehow caused the orb to go away. Marfa gets a lot of tourism as people drive there to see the lights. There's not really much other reason to go to Marfa. Tourism brings in money, which is a good thing. In Laredo, we have some mystery lights that would make a nice attraction, except for these lights are only visible on private property. People have reported seeing strange lights out on a ranch where there's no reason for anything of the sort to be there. The lights would appear and disappear at various times of the night. Using night vision cameras, thermal cameras, and digital cameras, the LPRS team set up on a hill overlooking the area where the mystery lights had been seen. Those of y'all that ride your bikes out on the bike trail out on the I'm drawing a blank here. I was going to say San Agustin Road, but that's not it. San Ignacio Road. Those of y'all that ride your bikes out on San Ignacio Road will be familiar with that hill. You take off from the gate, you ride about 3 miles, and all of a sudden there's this killer hill that's really long, and you have to struggle to make it to the top of that hill. Usually means standing up on the pedals. That's the hill that the LPRS were using. Well, the lights would appear late at night, and the LPRS team were able to watch them, record them, get some photographs of them. The lights have kind of an orange coloration, and they're lined up in a row. They appear to be 9 lights, all at the same level, even though the terrain at this point is not level. The land dips down, but the lights all stay in a straight row. None of the lights have a heat signature or chemical combustion trail. There's no sound coming from the area, and there's no production of oil field equipment or anything like that anywhere nearby. One night, they could see 6 lights that were visible, and they looked to be a random distance apart. But after taking a photograph and looking carefully, you can see that they're sets of 2 lights with a gap between them. The 2 lights and then a gap, 2 lights and a gap, and 2 lights. And if you look closely, you'll notice that this actually is a pattern. After some time of watching the lights, they noticed there were now 9 lights, also set in a straight line across the horizon. The area where the lights are is uninhabited. There's no machinery there. No oil field equipment or ranch paraphernalia. There's nothing out there. I know, I've been out there on many occasions. Driving out to where the lights appear, there's only brush, mesquite trees, cactus, and ratama bushes. You've got rattlesnakes, rabbits, and coyotes running in the area, as well as some cattle and a few mountain lions. Some folks are shocked to hear we have mountain lions as close as the edge of town. So far, I've seen 4. The lights have now become known as the Laredo Lights, People from all over Laredo and some folks from Mexico have gone out there to have a look. There's no explanation for the lights, only questions. My wife and I have been out to the hill, and we've seen the lights as well. At the time, they were somewhat diminished, and they only showed up for about 15 minutes. The lights can't be from swamp gas because, well, where they're sitting, there's no water. There's no tanks. There's no cattle tanks. There's no marshy land. At one time during World War II, the Army Air Corps used the area as a live fire range. In order to train B-17 crewmen, the Army would pile the men into the bed of a deuce-and-a-half truck. They would drive them out to the east on a bumpy ranch road. There was a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the side of the truck, and the men would engage targets out on the ranch. There was also a huge electric train that ran on an oval track. The train was pulling targets, and fighter pilots would fly over and try engaging these targets. To keep the men running the train alive, there's a concrete bunker a few dozen yards away. The bunker is still there, and you can see it, but only if you can get permission to go out on the land. There are still piles of spent .50 caliber bullets all over the ground, and quite a few .30 caliber rounds as well. They picked up all the brass to reuse it, but the bullets, there was no reason to pick them up. If you look at a map of the area, the old live fire range are right about in line with where the ghost lights are seen. At one time, we were looking to use the old radar tower to look at the lights, but now the land where the radar tower sits has been bought by one person, and there's become a legal battle between that person and the person that owns the ranch. The gates have popped up everywhere with locks on them, and, well, it's getting kind of ugly out there. Way back, 10, 15 years ago, you could drive out San Ignacio Road. You could sit up on that hill and you could watch meteorites, or meteors, whenever there was a meteor shower. Used to be dozens of people would sit out there, and nobody would leave their trash. Everybody would pick everything up and leave in an orderly manner. Now, it's all locked up. Only the bikers can go out there because, well, you got to pay a fee to use the bike trail. There's another set of mystery lights in North Carolina. Now, these are the Brown Mountain Lights. They're a series of ghost lights that have been seen by many people. You can see the lights from the Blue Ridge Parkway at milepost 310 and 301, and from the Brown Mountain Overlook along North Carolina Highway 181 near Jonas Ridge. Additionally, good sightings of the lights have been reported from the top of Table Rock and Weissman's View, which are both located in Linville Gorge Wilderness. The Brown Mountain Lights have been observed for centuries, and multiple legends have arisen around the phenomenon. The Cherokee were aware of the lights, and according to some accounts, claim that these were the souls of Cherokee women searching for their men who had died in a great battle between the Cherokee and the Catawba that took place on the Brown Mountain. Another legend says that the lights are the ghostly echoes of lights that appeared during a search for a woman who had been murdered back in the 19th century. During one paranormal investigation, one of the team members rode up the trail on an ATV to the point where the lights could be seen. He was standing right where his companions said they could see the light. The guy on the ATV couldn't see anything odd, even though he was seen standing right next to the Brown Mountain Lights. In the town of St. Louis, Saskatchewan, Canada, for years people tell of seeing a light traveling along the train tracks, which have been long closed. This light is now called the St. Louis Light. It moves along the tracks as if a train is traveling where there's nothing to travel on. The light is described as becoming visible along the railroad bed north of St. Louis, where the tracks have long since been removed. The light travels the length of the railroad bridge, starting out as a slight glow that increases as it travels. People seeing it all say it looks like a train, or at least a ghost train, following where the tracks used to be. It will eventually get as bright as a good-sized star, and then slowly it will fade away. The light usually starts on the right side of the bed and moves to the center before disappearing after a few seconds or for as long as an hour. Some folks say they've seen smaller lights flash on and off in the general area of the main light. Others say they've seen the light followed by other lights, which are deep red color. The red light is sometimes preceded by reactions from animals, such as coyotes and wolves, that howl and geese honk when the lights appear. There must be something there that the animals can see or perceive, kind of like when your dog stands in one spot growling at unseen things. One legend says the St. Louis light couldn't be captured on photo or video. Well, both of these claims were found to be lacking, since the lights have been filmed and photographed on many occasions. It is also said the light can affect a car, interfering with the electronics, though this has never been documented. It is theorized that if a car is physically touched by the light, something bad will happen to that car, but this story has also been connected with other ghost lights. Not knowing what the light is, people have come up with theories. One story says the light is the visible specter of a rail worker's lantern. He is supposed to be walking along the tracks, looking for his head, which was cut off in an accident that took place years ago. This story has been repeated on other locations where ghost lights are seen. Another story says that the lantern is someone looking for a little girl on the tracks who was struck by the train. Some will tell you the light is related to a train accident. It could be the light is supposed to be the headlamp of the train engine, while the red light is the lantern which is marking the rear of the train. Most versions do not have anything specific to set the St. Louis apart from other ghost train stories. It's kind of like you go to different locations, different ghost lights, but you hear the same stories. There is one claim to the story that says the train passing by St. Louis, when it was stopped in a snowstorm on the tracks, two men decided to steal the mail. Eventually, one or both of the thieves got into an altercation with the conductor and they killed him. Later, the thieves got into a dispute between themselves and one of them killed the other one. Both bodies were hidden in the snow near the tracks, but they were found later in the spring when the snow had melted. There's no date present with this story, as some suggest it took place between World War I and II, which would put it right about in the 30s. And next, we have the Paulding Lights, which have been a mystery in a town for decades. They draw in researchers and film crews that document optical phenomenon. When darkness falls in the town of Paulding, the mystery lights appear. There are a lot of different stories about this mystery light, but most seem to say it has to do with a train. More specifically, a ghost train, or somebody who died in a railroad accident. Sightings of the lights have been reported for decades. Most agree the first written record of the lights came in the 1960s. Others believe it was spotted even earlier. Not being able to research the records, I can only go by what others say. Oh, don't want it, whatever it is they're selling. Some call it a spirit, others say it's swamp gas. And of course, the skeptics say that the phenomena is nothing but headlights. A group of researchers tried driving a car back and forth along all of the roads in the vicinity of the mystery lights. Anytime the car was seen, it was obviously a car. The other researchers could identify it as being a vehicle and not the mystery lights. The vehicle couldn't follow the route of the lights, and as it was forced to follow the roads, the lights would reflect off of trees and buildings. The folks come from all over the planet to admire this spectacle or to try to debunk it. Even when the experiments don't give the results wanted, the skeptics will say, "There, we proved it's just a cat wearing glasses," or some such nonsense. They will ignore anything that doesn't fit into their preconceived ideas. I love a good mystery. Oak Island is one of my favorites. I really don't want to know what's down there at the bottom of the money pit. The day Rick and Marty find the Ark of the Covenant or all of the Templars' treasure will be the end of this mystery. No matter what they find, no matter how bizarre it might be, it's not going to be enough to make up for the hundreds of years and the millions of dollars spent on getting to the bottom. I watch The Curse of Oak Island all the time. I watch the reruns. I must be an acorn. It's right up there with Bigfoot. The day Sasquatch comes walking into town and gets interviewed by either Gunnar Monson or Cliff Barrickman, my interest will dissolve faster than my bank account, and I'll have to look for some other mystery to look into. If aliens ever land on the White House lawn, well, UFOs aren't going to be that interesting anymore. In fact, they won't be UFOs anymore because we'll know what they are. The Girden Lights in Arkansas have been seen for years, going back to December 1931. A railroad section foreman named Will McLean fired one of his workers, Lewis McBride, because apparently he had sabotaged a section of the track that caused a freight train to derail. Why he did it, nobody knows. People do some crazy things. Not being too happy about getting sacked, McBride beat McLean with a pickaxe and wound up killing him. McLean's body was found later by a search party along the side of the tracks. McBride confessed to the murder and he was executed for his crime. Not long after the murder, people began seeing a mysterious phenomenon called the Girden Light, a strange glowing light that floats along the railroad tracks. Many believe that the light is the spirit of Will McLean haunting the tracks. Specifically, they believe that the light comes from his lantern, which he carried during work along the tracks. One of the first sightings was by a conductor named John. While working on a train, he saw a light on the back of the platform, and he observed that this light was following the train. Suddenly, it shot straight up into the air. It continued to follow the train for over a mile, and then it flew through the trees, settling into the local cemetery. Since then, thousands of people have gone to the train tracks in hopes of seeing the Girden Lights. Several eyewitnesses say that the light flashes slowly. It floats about 3 feet in the air, and then it veers off before vanishing. To this day, there have been no complete explanations for what the Girden Light might be. November 1994, the Unsolved Mysteries photographer took the first known photograph of the Girden Light. The same photographer later captured a video of the light moving along the tracks. Dr. Charles Lemming investigated several theories as to what the Girden Light may be. One theory is that the light may came from, are you ready for this? Cars' headlights. Who would have believed it? The headlights were supposed to be coming from the interstate. However, Charles was able to find several eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen the lights long before the interstate was open. Another possible explanation for the Girden Lights was swamp gas, created by decomposing vegetation which spontaneously combusted. However, Many witnesses claim to have seen the lights when it was windy, so it could not have been swamp gas on those occasions. Another theory is the light is what is known as PS electric effect, which occurs when quartz crystal, under immense pressure, emits an electric current. Girden sits above a large amount of quartz crystal, and it's on a fault line. Also, many people claim the Girden Light was seen after the murder of Will McLean, which was around the same time there was a major earthquake that occurred in the area. However, what cannot be explained is how the current migrates above the surface and it takes on the shape of a ball. Like I said, some folks will drag out any kind of explanation and try to make it fit. Instead, maybe they should actually investigate the lights seen all over the place instead of trying to debunk them by any means possible. The Light of Saratoga is a legend located in the Big Thicket of southeast Texas. The legend of a mysterious light, which is also known as the Ghost Road of Saratoga, the Saratoga Light, and the Briggs Road Ghost Light. It's located on a dirt road, and it's a light that may appear and disappear at random during the dark of night. 1902, Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe Railroad put in a survey line from Bragg to Saratoga. Once the route was mapped out, the railroad was brought in. They ran from the Big Thicket Forest to Saratoga. It would go from Saratoga to Beaumont, carrying people, cattle, and oil, as well as logs. When the area's oil boom and the virgin pine gave out, the road crews pulled up the tracks in 1934. Well, the county bought the right-of-way, and they turned the track bed into a county road. The road is between Beaumont and Livingston, approximately 16 miles west of Conce, Texas. It's a dirt road that runs north and south, starting at the south end at the bend on Farm to Market Road, or FM 787, near Saratoga, and it ends at the north end near FM 1293, which is also next to a ghost town named Bragg Station. The cause of the light has not been established, but one common explanation is that it's the light from, you guessed it, cars traveling on the nearby highway. Skeptics just love car headlights. Car lights sure can do some strange things. I'm surprised nobody has said that the lights are actually from raccoons riding on hogs holding candles to see by. That's the one I'm going to start bandying about. People drive out to Bragg Road late at night and they sit at one end watching to see the lights. The lights will appear far down the road. It looks like somebody shining a flashlight towards them. The light will sometimes begin to grow brighter or just stay the same consistency. Sometimes it looks as if the light is coming towards the observers. Anyone trying to intercept the light by driving or walking towards it will be disappointed when the light simply fades away. If you sit and watch, the light might be visible for extended periods of time. If this was a car's headlights, why would it stay in one place? If a car was driving along the road, why doesn't it never get close to the people that are watching and waiting? These are the questions the skeptics always choose to ignore. Personally, I am going to stick with all of these lights being ghost lights. No matter how many skeptics come along with explanations as to what folks are seeing, the mystery will remain and it will make life interesting. Not everything can be explained. Not everything needs to be explained. Life without mysteries would not be much of a life. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, let them know what they're missing. If you have an idea for a show that you'd like to hear, let me know. You can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Also, if you have any stories that you'd like to see in a book, send them to me. I'll see if I can't include them in my next book. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.